Guten Lernen, Black Murder, a good Woch. Mitzvah Shabbos Kaddish. We are up to Daf Mem Aleph. So we are going through the pasuk where, just to remind you what we're learning, we have the pasuk that in the Parsha of Vayikra. First, it talks about a Kohen Mashiach. If somebody, a Kohen, committed an Avera thinking that it was permitted, he rules himself that it's permitted. And it turned out to be it wasn't. So the Torah then delineates the kind of carbon he brings, a pot, Kohen Mashiach, he brings a bull, which is sprayed on the inside, the inner Mizbeach, and then the flesh itself is burned outside of the Beis Hamikdash. And then the next parsha talks about the Pad Helim Davar Shel Tzibur, where the entire community relied on the Bezdin who gave a wrong psak, realized they made a mistake, so they bring also a bull, but it's a Pad Helim Davar Shel Tzibur. And this Pad Helim Davar Shel Tzibur, the again lists all the dinim that applies it. But then we have a pasuk where it seems to be a lot of extra words, and we learn out dinim from every word in that pasuk that we are comparing other kapanas to Pad Helim Davar Shel Tzibur. So the pasuk, for example, this is what we started yesterday. It says, "V'asal la par," you should do to this par, kasher asal, like you did. What do you mean? You should do to this par like you did. So we already said that that's a doubling up to tell you that whatever I tell you over here is ma'akiv. Because by kachim, if it doesn't repeat it, then we say it's only lechatchila. So it repeats it again to tell you that it's ma'akiv. And then the pasuk continues, v'asal lapar, you should do to the bull like you did to the parachatas, the other bull. Each one here is coming to teach you something. And ken yasalo, you should do to it, and so on. So Rapapa comes along. We're up to the two dots in Mem Aleph Amud Aleph. And we're following now. If you follow Rabbi Shmuel, we're going to go according to his way, which he says we don't need to learn everything from a pasuk because we can learn from a kal v'chomer. So we'll continue learning the pasuk according to him. And it goes as follows: Lepar, 6 lines on top. It says in the pasuk that you should do to the par, to which par? So before we learned it was talking about the par Kohen Mashiach, but here in Rabbi Shmuel's version, the par ze par helam davar shel tzibur. You should do to this par of davar shel tzibur. This is the helam davar. This is the par that the entire community makes a mistake. This is the par. I want you to learn this par from this chapter. Now this is quite obviously difficult to understand because the whole Parsha is talking about the par helam davar shel tzibur. So what do you mean you want par helam davar shel tzibur to learn from itself? What does that mean? It's written, it's talking about the Pad Helam Davar. So what do you mean you should do to the other par known as Pad Helam like you did to this par, which is Pad Helam? What does that even mean? So Omar Papa does an interesting thing. We have a rule that if you learn B from A via a method of Hekesh, because the words are written next to each other, we could equate the two, you cannot then learn B should teach C the same dinim, because B itself it has to be written in B itself if you want to teach C. But if B learns it out from A via Hekesh, you cannot then go ahead and teach it to C via Hekesh. Yesterday we learned that there's an argument if B learns from A via Hekesh, can B then teach C via Kal v'chomer? But when it comes to another Hekesh, it can't go that far. So, and therefore, since a couple of the dinim that apply to Par Helam Davar Shel Tzibur is not written with Furish there. Par Helam Davar Shel Tzibur itself learns it from somewhere else. Let's say from Par Kohen Mashiach or from Par Kippur, learns from somewhere else. Then if Par Helam Shel Tzibur wants to teach it to a third place, it can't. Now, there's another kind of Helam Davar that is specifically Avodah Zarah. If they relied on a Bezdin and told them advice regarding Avodah Zarah, which turned out to be incorrect, then they have to bring a carbon, but there the carbon is different. Instead of bringing a bull, you bring a goat. In fact, instead of bringing one carbon, you bring an oil and a chatas. But there's a goat, and there the Torah does not spell out what you're supposed to do with a goat. So we're going to learn a number of dinim regarding the goat from Par Helam Davar Shel Tzibur. But those dinim, the Par Helam Davar Shel Tzibur, it's not written in the footage. They learned it from somewhere else. You cannot then pass it on to a goat. Got a problem. So what the Torah, I'm just giving you a preview of what we're going to learn. So what the Torah did was, it wrote again, I want you to learn Par Helam Davar Shel Tzibur from elsewhere by bringing down again, it says here, La Par. Now what that we are going to learn from Par Kohen Mashiach regarding a certain halacha, and that is the halacha. What do you do with we know that we know that the fats goes on the mizbech. What about the Yosedas HaKavod, the diaphragm and the two kidneys? It's not mentioned at all in the Parsha Par Helen Dovish Tzibur. You know, we learn it from Par Koy Mashiach. There it mentions the Yosedas HaKavod, so you also bring it over to the Par Helen Dover. Now you want to also learn the same halach applies to Seir Avodah Zorah there by Par Helen Avodah Zorah. But you can't, because if B learns from A, how can B then teach C? So by saying another hekish, again saying teach Lepar, I want you to learn Helam Dovish Tzibur from, and it's repeating a second time to learn from Par Koy Mashiach. This, because it's a second time, it's as if this par is a code word for that halacha. It's as if that halacha of Yesed Covenant is actually inscribed and written in this portion of Par Helam Dovish Tzibur. So now it's not B learning from A; it's written in B itself. So B now can transfer it to C. That's what the Gemara says. No problem. He wants to learn out. He wants to be able to teach. And to teach us something applies to this case of the goat of Avodah Zarah. And yet, it's not written. How do you know it? Merely from a hekish. And therefore, Itzich lepar, we need the word lepar, lemeheve command the. That's a code word, as if this halacha is written right here. And therefore, to have it shouldn't be treated as if B, he learns it from A, if I hekesh, now you want to teach C. No, of course, it repeats again lepar, as if it's written right here, as if that which it says you should do to this part, like you did by Par Koy Mashiach, written like a second time. But also the part, as if that which was written in Par Koy Mashiach is now written here in Par Helam Dover. Says the Gemara, Tanya goes above. In fact, we learned the Braisa supporting it up, but that then the word lepar is referring to itself, like a reflexive property. What it says, also kasher, also says you should do like you did. Ma tamud loimer lepar. What do you mean? It says, also, why does it say lepar? Why does it say lepar? Because there in the Parsha Shlach, where it talks about the people who followed Avodah Bezin and did Avodah Zarah, there it says you should bring your korban and you bring your fire offering, and it says over there because they made a shagig, and then it says the following, which seems to be totally extra. It says in the pasuk there they brought their korban, they brought their korban, the fiery korban, and the pasuk concludes the chatosam Lifnei Hashem Argosa, the chattas before Hashem on their mistake. The whole parsha is talking about korban chattas on their mistake. Why does it repeat that again? It's as if to say that their chattas is treated just like another kind of a korban which is on shagig. What's this? Is that similar korban? What's that other korban? Where pad helam davash tzibur? There it opens up the statement by saying if people in the community made a mistake, so we're going to learn seide avodah zarah from Par Held of the Tzibur, because in the Parsha of Seir Vayzor it says the Chatasam Lifnei Hashem Al Gogasam. So therefore, Chatasam Elu Seire Avodah Chavim. Chatasam, that is the talking about the Seire, the goats of Avodah Zarah. Shgogasam, that's talking about Par Held of the Tzibur. And the Torah says Chatasam out Gogasam. Torah says Chatasam Ladinim regarding the Chatasam, this korban you bring from Avodah Zarah. Harei Kish Gogasam. You learn it out from Shegi from Parel of the Zibur. And now the Bryce not so what's it do a papa because the Bryce continues. Gogasam Meichel Amad Lachayda. We learn a Parel of the Zibur. Leibe Hekesha. You learn that itself out from Par Koy Mashiach. That's a Hekesh. And the rule is Chidavar Alon Behekesh Chayim Alon Behekesh. How can you something which is derived from a Hekesh then go transfer to another place by a Hekesh? Therefore, therefore, it's written in the parsha of Par Helam Dovish Tzibur. There's an extra word lepar. It says there lepar. Ze par helen dovish tzibur. Again, it's written lepar. Even though we're talking about the par helen tzibur, it's written again lepar ze par koy mashiach. The second part is it says that you should do to the par like you did to the parachatas, just like you did to the parachatas, which is the par koy mashiach. Over there, you did the yesedus and shtei hakovet, the yesedus and the shtei kloyes. You did it on the yesedus hakovet and the shtei kloyes, the diaphragm, and the two kidneys, and you put it on the mizbeach. So too, you should do to the par helen dovish tzibur. Even though we know that already, but it says also kasher also do the same thing you did, but I'm repeating it again as if it's written right here. Okay, so that's exactly what our Papa said. Oh, Mama, let me understand. You're bringing me that. How do we know that we learned the dinim of Seir Avodah Zarah from Par Helm David? Because in Parsha Shlach it says the Chatosam Alsh Gogosam. Why don't we learn better? In this very pasuk, we learned before already. In this very pasuk in Vayikra, where it talks about Par Helm David Shetzibur, it says over there you should do to the par kasha also the par chatas, and we said which chatas we talking about. That chatas is the seiri avodah zarah, and the seiri avodah zarah you compare to par helam. So you, in this very pasuk that we're going to learn from Chaim Mashiach, it also mentions already that you're learning the seiri avodah zarah from par. So why do you have to go ahead and tell me we learn it from pasuk and shlach? Learn from the very pasuk. We learned before to teach you include the goat. In that very pasuk. So the Gemara can say, of course, we're going to learn Se'ire Avodah Zarah from Param Hel Davar, but there's two kinds of parts. There's two parts. There are all those dinim that are recorded mefurish in Par Hel Davar, and then there are dinim which we have code words. So maybe we would have thought if we only had this pasuk here telling us we compare Se'ire Avodah Zarah to Par Hel Davar, I would think it's only regarding things which are written clearly, explicitly, not implicitly. Therefore, we need this other pasuk shlach to tell you we learn more things, even those which are implicit. Says I would have thought Hanimili Hazos only regarding the spraying. That what do we learn? See the Avodah Zarah from Par Heldover regarding the sprayings, but regarding the Ksima Guf, it's written it clearly. Aval you said it it's not written clearly; it's only implicit. A malay, maybe that we don't draw on, and we don't compare. It will compare Se'id Avodah Zarah to that. Commercial that we do. Papa asked the question. But Tano, and we learned in you say that you said before yesterday that what do we learn from Yom Kippur? We learn out that Yom Kippur, not regarding that it's ma'akiv, that if you don't do all the sprinkling, it's not good. Not like a normal carbon on the outside, that if you don't do all the sprinkling, as long as you did one, of course, it feels good enough. But Yom Kippur is different. And you said, no, we don't learn that out from Seder V'Zara. We learn that out because it says, like Rita said, either because it says chukah or because it says kila, you finish all the jobs, then the Kippur. But have a Braisa that clearly says, like we learned the other, but we learned yesterday, that we learn from Se'ide Avodah Zarah we learn from Par Helem Davash Tzibur, just like over there. So also, guys, repeats twice to tell you that you have to, it's essential that you have to spray all four. The same thing applies to Yom Kippur. Not like you say it's only limited to the laws of Es, Dam, and Tevilah. You said that it's only regarding three laws. Es, that there's a wart or a blister on the hand, it's not a chatzitza, because it says Es, it's boy, even things which are secondary to your finger are good enough. And then you learn badam, that the blood had to be already sitting in the vessel before. It has to be the full amount of blood that you require, had to be in the vessel, and you can't fill it up afterwards. That can be part of a shear. And then you learn v'tavel, don't use the blood that's surrounding on the surface of the keli. You have to immerse your finger. And he said that's what Yom Kippur learns from Par Helm Dover, and not the din of Iku. But it's not so, because it says we learn Par Yom Kippurim l'chol masham be'inya kama. We learn it for everything, not just for es dam, badam, and tefillah. We also use it to teach you that if you don't do all the sprinklings, you're not yaitzer. So the Gemara be'emes Tanoyi, it's a machlekes Tanoyi. Tana Devei Rav, the main brises, which are generally called Tana Devei Rav, that's the general brises. There it says clearly that the only Hachi Tana, the way I just said it, the only thing you learn out is Es Padam Betfilah. But Devei Rabbi Shmuel, the other brises, which Rabbi Shmuel, where also they studied many Mishnahs, and there were a number of Tanaim there as well. Like Rabbi says here, like Rashi says, like Rabbi the same thing to Rabbi Shmuel, they organize it. Loi Mabi Hachi. They don't agree with me. They learn also other things. So the Gemara, now that we brought Torah Shmuel, the Gemara brings an interesting thing, which actually seems to be contradictory, but somehow or another you can reconcile it. Torah Shmuel. Why is it you have two dinim? You have Par Koyim Mashiach, and there the Torah delineates every detail, including what you do with the diaphragm and with the kidneys. And then you have the same thing with the next parsha, Par Hel of Tzibur. Again, the Torah specifies everything you have to do, but omits what you do with the diaphragm and the kidneys. The question is why? Why don't it say but Pat knows a tzibur? So he gives an analogy. He said you have a tzibur and you have a yachid. So marshal and mela bosadam Shazam al oiva. He's upset with those he loves, and that's the community at large. He loves the entire community. So therefore, he decided, you know what? I'm not going to elaborate on things which are negative. So I'm going to briefly tell them what they have to do, and I'm going to elaborate. Out of the love. Mashen Kaimashich is an individual. The love there is not as great, not as intense, and therefore there he decides, Hashem just puts in all the details, what you have to do. Then he continues. Why? Nemra, when it comes to Kaim Mashiach, he says what you have to do with the blood, sprinkle it against the paroiches. He says paroiches hakodesh. He says the holy paroiches. And yet, that's only by Par Mashiach. Well, I never Par Hel Tzibur. But when it comes to Par Hel Tzibur, doesn't mention a word about kodesh, doesn't mention holy. So he says now the reverse. Marshal Malbasadam, Shesarchom the entire dinner, betrayed him. If it's only a minority of people that betrayed him, so then what? His council, they're all there. It's all good. The majority of people betrayed him. So if only a minority of the people, what do you call it? So he still has his council. He still has his Kayin and Mashiach, and therefore it's still holy. But if everybody betrayed him, then the Eibishter sort of loses I guess his closeness or his counsel, and therefore it's not holy. As if there's two things here. There's Ava the Tzibur greater than Yochid. But when it comes to counsel, when it comes to maybe respect, it's more the individual than the Tzibur. And so interesting contrast there. Then back to our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said that the difference between the sprinkling of blood in the outer mizbech and those kabbalas are required, the inner mizbech is, in the outer mizbech you have to spray on all four corners, but if you did it on one, it's good enough. The inner mizbech you need to do all four. So we said regarding the outer mizbech, if you had in mind pigul with the first sprinkling, and then you had other thoughts regarding the other sprinkling, which may be different thoughts, doesn't matter, because normally we say machshava cancels, but since the critical sprinkling was the first one, whatever you did afterwards, we don't care. But regarding the inner mizbech, because you need to spray all four times, if you only had in mind pigul the first one, the next one you had something else in mind, it's not pigul. So the Mishnah there says, which the normal reading would be, you did the first three properly. And then the last one, you did it wrong. You had pigul, whatever it is. It does not become pigul because you need to do all four to make it pigul. And we have a rule that chatzi matid. If you want, we said during the main avodas, that is shechting, receiving the blood, transferring the blood, halacha, then sprinkling it. Any one of those four stages, you make pigul, but it has to be throughout the entire malach, that particular avodah. If you didn't do through the entire, only a chatzi, only half, chatzi matid is not considered pigul. Now, Taran Hos, we learned in the Mishnah, which seems to clearly echo this, but it seems to be in machlekes. It says there, now when it comes to a korban mincha has two matirim. You have the kaimitz, you got to take with your three fingers and take a piece off and put it on the mizbeach and roast it. And you also have the levina. After you did the kmitza, you take the levina, the frank incense that was there, the spice, and you put it on the mizbeach and you burn it. These are the two matirim. So what happens if pigul bekaimitz v'lei levina? When you did the kmitza, you had in mind that you're going to eat the mincha another time, the wrong time. But levina, you didn't have anything in mind. So therefore, it's like a chatzi matir, because they both together make up one matir to enable you to eat the rest of the mincha. Is that maybe a pigul? Rameh says, regardless, the pigul v'chayav no karas sounds like Rameh holds that even a chatzi matir is sufficient. And the chum saying by karas actually yifagel b'chol matir. Chum says not karas until you yifagel the whole matir. So l'chayda, this idea of chatzi matir is machlekes Rameh Chumim. Rish Lakish comes and changes around the whole pshat. He says nobody holds that a chatzi matir is permitted. You need entire matter. So what's Pshat Meir? He has a new Pshat here. And the Pshat Bekitza is as follows. What happens if you have a certain thought when you start something, but then the rest of the time you're neutral? Like we say, for example, when a Sefer writes Git, he has to have in mind Lishma when he starts, and then you don't have to sit the whole time and think Lishma. We'll say that everything else you did continued in the first step, that is all Lishma. So this is what Amir is saying. What happens if the first part of the zrika, the first zrika that you did, you had in mind pigul, then the rest of the zrikas you have no thoughts in mind. It continues the same way. It's as if you had pigul on the whole thing. But if the first part you did that, you don't have a bad thought. It's only the second half of it you did. Then it's a chatzi matir, and it's nothing. In other words, the whole vort meir, of course, chati matir doesn't work, but he said it's the full matir because whatever you did afterwards, if you had no thought at all, just neutral, it's a continuation of what you started. You're perpetuating what you started. So this is what he says here. Don't read time of the medic so if I'm a chatzimati, holds you do a chatzimati. It's not pshat at all. El Hochemai Skin, we're talking about here. That he put the kaimas there with a machshava, thinking that a pigul, the halavaina b'shtika, but the next half of the matter he had no thought, but neutral. And kasavar Amei is of the view, kala oisa aldas rishayin ha'oisa, that anything that takes place afterwards is a continuation of before. That's what he says here. And he says here, Mai, how does he know to revolutionize the Pshat of the He said, no, from our Mishnah, we just learned. What does the Mishnah say? So therefore, if you did the first three Zrikas Kitikunim, which the Pshat is you did it correctly, nothing wrong, and the last one you did it wrong, it's not Pigul. What about the reverse? If the first, so it seems in the Mishnah only because the last one, what about the first one was done? Pigul, and the rest he did Kitikunim, you were neutral. It would be pigul. Why? All you had thoughts of the first zikr, because everything else travels in that direction. Continuation. He says the fichach im nasakul kitikun. He did them all correctly. When they're incorrectly, possible by kaddish. It is possible, but it's always possible. There's no kaddish. It's not really pigul. So why? Because it's only the last one. It's a chatimata. Sounds like from the Mishnah. Let's infer. The first one you did, what pigul. The kula kitikun. The rest you did all right. It is pigul. Why? Because they're all following the first thought. Mani. Now, who could this be? According to the Rabbanan, they say it's a chatzi matir. They don't follow the first order. It's a chatzi matir. How can it be? It doesn't exist for chatzi matir. It must be Ella Rab Meir. It must be Rab Meir. Those according to Chacham, even if the first one you thought was pigul, the rest doesn't follow. It's a chatzi matir. Must be Rab Meir. Now, if you tell me Rameir holds the vort is because Rameir holds that a chatzi mate, it is also pigul, then my nafkamina if it's the last sprinkling or the first sprinkling. If you had one of the sprinklings in mind to be pigul, it's pigul. Then even the way it should, even the way the Mishnah says the first three were no good, but he did it properly. The last one you did pigul, it should be pigul. Must be. There's only one way of saying it's Rameir. Can't be Rameir. It must be Rameir. And because how do we know can't be Rabbanan? Because we can infer that if the first one was not pigul, the rest weren't. It is pigul. Can't be Rabbanan. They hold no chatzimat. It must be Rameir. And so why should it be a difference if it's the first one or the last one? The difference is if you follow the first one or not. My lama should have holds that everything else is neutral follows along. Comes along Rabbi Shmuel and says, I don't like your pshat because push the reading when the Chacham say until you mefagel kol hamata, seems like they're negating Rameir who says that even a chatzi matter. Not that they're arguing in if you follow the first or the last thought. So how you learn pshat then in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah is the Rabbanon. You can ask me a question. The Rabbanon hold you don't do chatzi matter. The way we understood Rameir holds you do chatzi matter, so obviously it can't be Rameir. So it must be the Rabbanon. But if the Rabbanon, so my nafkamin, if it's the last thought or the first thought, why should be a difference? Says Imani, you're wrong. You think that when it says tikkunin means you had the right thoughts, and like it tikkunin means you had the wrong thoughts. It's exactly the opposite. Tikkunin means you thought of pigul. You thought of pigul. And so the first three were actually pigul. And like tikkunin means you didn't think of pigul. You were just neutral. And the Mishnah says it's not pigul because you don't follow your first thoughts. Or my tikkunin. And it's a chatzi matet. So even I don't care which way it is, which is first, which is last, it's not pigul. Well, my kitikunan means lepigul. So how can that be? So those who counter back to the show, you don't agree with the shlokish, so you want to say that one. It's talking about kitikunan means that it's pigul. It's wrong. It says im nasan kulan kitikunan. The achas shaloi kitikunan. If the vart is that you had in mind the first three pigul and the last one you didn't, and we don't say it follows the first ones, then it should have said the achas b'shtika. or achas, that's it. By saying achas shaloi tikkunim means you did something actively wrong. So then tikkunim means that they weren't wrong. They were kosher. Not the way you want to look at tikkunim means you did it pigul. Because then the last case should have said that, not a case of loy tikkunim, to say that you were quiet. You were neutral. Tony im nasa kul kitkunim. Va'achas and one of them shel kitkunim pasul ve'ebakar and meklal the tikna leachshinu dasa that the kitkunim did it right and loy kitkunim did it wrong. Amar Rav, so Rav gives an answer no. Could be the chachamim and a chatzim matir doesn't work. And the chiddush and it doesn't make a difference if it's first or last. If you did only one of them, it's not. And the pshat in the Mishnah is you did kitikun in the first three. You sprayed it whatever people, and the last one you did shaloikun means you thought you had in mind chutz l'mekaymai. Another bad thought, but a different bad thought. Well, Rav Ashi is going to say it was a karma chatas, and you had in mind a different karma, which we learned in the beginning of Zevachim. Chatas and Pesach are an exception. That if you had shaloi l'shman, it is possible. That's what like the kuna. Not that you were neutral. It's like that you had in mind the roy b'kayma, and the din is there's no pigul here because it's a chatzimati. But Rabashi Yom Shloish Moy, Tumar Kram Chatas, and Shloish Lishmoy, and that's what the kuna is. And therefore it's not pigul. If you would have thought the fourth one, but here you changed to a different thought, so it cancels the pigul thought. So Mora says, okay, think about it a minute. So you just proved his luggage is right. You're telling me the only reason why it's not pigul is because the first three you thought of pigul, and the fourth one you thought of chutz l'mekaymai. The fourth one you thought shloil l'shmai. Mashma, but what happened the fourth one? It was neutral. It would have been pigul. Why? Only one possibility, because since it was neutral, it's continue what you started. So it seems to me that if he did not have a mind chutzul kaimai, did not have a mind shloil lishmai, was just neutral, Yitaka would be chayv pigul. He was neutral. Continuation. So no raya. It follows the flow of the Mishnah. Remember, we're contrasting it to doing avodah zarah, to doing a zrikas on the outside mizbech. Over there, on the outer mizbech, you had pigul. And then you change to another machshava, let's say chutz l'mekaymai. We say that one machshava, we had by pigul. Then you did the first spray pigul, and the second one you did chutz l'mekaymai. We said chutz l'mekaymai does not cancel pigul because on the outside mizbech, what's critical is only the first zrika, and the first zrika was pigul. We don't care what you do afterwards. So when we draw a contrast and we say the inner mizbech, so we're going to use the same example and say, but in the inner mizbech. In the mizbech, we would say it is not pigul, even though you had in mind pigul first and then chutz coming afterwards. It is not pigul because all four zikas are important. But the truth of the matter is, even if it was a neutral thought, it wouldn't be pigul because all four are important. But we're just drawing a contrast to the outer mizbech. I don't pigul chayon the kodesh, and let me say the pasuk about kodesh. Meisvei. Last hour question again. We're continuing the discussion about Ish Lakish. It says, when do we say that one matana makes the pigul only bedomim hanitnin amebech? It's only the outer mizbech. Aval domim hanitnin amebech, but blood that was done on the inner mizbech. What do you mean blood done on the inner mizbech? Okay, for example, arboyim v'sholosh shel Yom Kippurim, the 43 sprays of Yom Kippur. The achad asa shapar kohen Mashiach. What do you mean 43 sprays of Yom Kippur? Because on Yom Kippur you have two. You have a bull and you have a goat, and both of them you brew inside. But in Yom Kippur we also add the kodesh kedoshim. You spray one on top, achaz l'mayla v'shav l'mata. So you do that with the blood of the par. You do that with the blood of the goat. So that's already 8 and 8 is 16. Then you do that in the heichel opposite the paroiches. So that's another 16. It's already 32. Then you do 4 on the corners of the mizbech, and right now we're assuming that we mix the blood of the bull with the blood of the goat and make it 4. So that's 36. And then we do another 7. We learned that you do on top of the mizbech. That's 43. So there's 43 sprays there. And then you have over achad asa shapar kohen Mashiach. The kohen Mashiach has 11. The 7 against the paroiches and the 4 on the inner mizbech. Over achad asa shapar Mashiach, or the 7 or the 11 of the par held over, the 4 on the corners of the mizbech and 7 from the paroiches. Is now. So there's 3 sets. There's the kodesh kedoshim, there's the kodesh, and then there is the for the paroiches, and then there's the mizbech. So it says here, pigul, bein b'rishena, whether you mafagel the very first set, bein b'shniya the second set, bein b'shlish the third set. Rameir says pigul is pigul v'chayav and olokaris. Rameir says any one of the three sets, even the second or the third, you had in mind pigul, it's karis. Now the way the Shlokers learned that the vart chatzimata doesn't work, it's because the first one was pigul, and then we just continue. Here it says clearly, or the second or the third. I mean, the first one you did all right. It's only the second one you had in mind pigul, and it's pigul. And the Chum say, "Ain but pigul ain't karis yifagim b'cholamata." Tony me, what do we learn? However, pigul maybe the shayda, maybe shtei, maybe shlishes. Upal the Meir argues and he says, yes, that is pigul. So it can't be like Rish Lakish. Interesting. I want to talk about how much you talking about here. We're talking about over here is that let's say you shechted, let's say you did the first zrikas in the Kodesh Kedoshim, and then suddenly you spilled out the blood. There's no more blood left. You have to shecht another korban now for the next stage. So for the next stage, that shchita is only for that shchita is for the next one. So when he says here, the second one is you made a separate shchita, and therefore it doesn't matter what happened in the first one. This is a whole separate matter. This is individual matter, so therefore it's considered a whole independent matter. And I made whole, that's considered independent. Each shchita, you spill that every time between each stage. So each time you have to shech a new animal. So that new animal is the total matter for that section, become independent segments, and therefore it's considered a kule matter. That's the vorter. It's not a chatzi matter, it's a kule matter, and that's why it's not dependent on before. It's totally on its own. So the obvious question is, which we're taking tomorrow, is according to Chachamim, they argue and say it's not. Why not? It's individual. And we're going to find an opinion that says that even in this case here, they're all treated like one whole group. Okay, it's like one, and therefore it's only a chatzi matter. We'll continue tomorrow. Mitzvah Shem. Have a good